James. They're already believing. And it's not contextually about how to be saved. It's to be how to validate that you already are. How to show that you already are.
Is that theology you're putting into it? Or is
No,
that what it says?
that's contextually what it is.
Oh, it's what it is or what it says?
Read it.
That's why we're there.
Yeah.
So it says, what use is it, my brethren, if
Which
someone,
verse are you on?
chapter 2, verse 14. What use is it, my brethren, if someone says he has faith? So like Pastor Wade said,
spoken faith.
my brethren, if someone says he has faith, if he says, I believe this, but has no works, can that faith save him? If brother or sister is without clothing and in need of daily food, and one of you says to him, go in peace, be warmed and filled, and yet you do not give them what is necessary for their body, what use is that? Even so, faith, if it has no works, is dead, being by itself. So, he says, but someone well may say, you have faith and I have works. Show me the faith without works, and I will show you my faith by my works. Okay. So, in context, two believers saying, well, someone says, I have faith, but they don't act on it. They don't act like they believe what they say they believe. Then is that truly actually believing faith? It's the way I like. So where I was going originally was the way I like to put it is if there was a chair here, and I said, I believe that chair will hold me up, and he went, take a seat. And I went, now I'm good. You go, well, do you really believe the chair will hold you up? It looks kind of rickety. Oh yeah, no, for sure, it'll hold me up. Do it. Sit. Show me. Prove it. I go, no, I'm good. And I don't really believe that the chair is going to hold me. I don't truly have faith in what I say I have faith in. It's a professed faith that's false.
So to kind of sum up the point, what he's getting at, it's more than a mere mental assent. It's more than information. It's more than like an acknowledgement of facts. There's actually, so in the Latin, there's like two terms, essentia and fiducia. It's really both. It's not just the one.
I believe this, and
the demons have essentia.
What are those two words?
Essentia, fiducia, they're Latin terms. So essentia is just like a mental assent or a mental acknowledgement, and fiducia is like an actual trusting faith that has action.
What does with that and with this have to tell me about how works come after faith?
So what he was getting at in the analogy he gave an example of essentia and fiducia in tandem working together. So that's what he's talking about. But that's not a formulaic equation from how a person goes from not saved to saved. That's the distinction.
Well, I understand what you're saying to me, but what I don't understand is, like, without trying to sound aggressive, I don't understand what that has to do with works coming after faith.
So what I'm trying to get, the point I'm trying to get across is that a professed faith, if it has no works, is not truly a saving faith. Those works that come after, because you actually believe what you say, I'm actually going to sit down into the chair that I believe will hold me, and I show you by sitting down in that chair, whether it holds me or not, I believe it because I'm sitting in it.
To maybe use the straw man you acknowledged of, the easy believism, antinomianism, people can just say they believe in Christ and then live a life of reckless sin. We could say that's a good example of where when the works don't follow, we can clearly conclude that, okay, something is off here, right? But if we then say, well, if they suddenly fix it, say they do a 180 with their behavior, does that then validate that they're saved on the basis of that? No. What it does say is perhaps something has happened in their life, but we don't really know, but that's the best evidence that we can look at is that whatever external fruit they produce.
So your point is that people can't do things to obtain a faith?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that? Okay.
Yeah, because if you think about like the parable of the sower, are you really familiar with it at all?
I don't want to assume that I know what you're talking about, but there's a couple parables of soil.
Yeah, so like the 4 different types of soil, you know what I'm talking about there? There's really only one that bears fruit, right?
Yeah.
There's only one.
Yeah.
And the only one that bears fruit, right, where it takes root and then it bears much fruit, right? Not a little, but much fruit.
Some 30, some 60,
in the other 3 examples, they never bear fruit, right? Like something happens, right? It lands on the gravel, or the bird comes and snatches it away, right? So in those three examples, you can say you're not going to see a lasting like faith and works in that person's life, because Jesus told us that's what would happen, right? So the only real ones, like he was saying, speaking to believers, the only real ones that will have any sort of fruit are the ones that actually have that root that was firmly planted in the soil. And that only happens when the gospel goes out.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, and I can even appreciate it, but that is not consistent with the New Testament. It's just not. I mean, I've talked to you before, even with the example of Cornelius, his prayers and his almsgivings went up to God as a memorial sacrifice, a literal priesthood offering, and that was before it says, if you believe in Peter's teachings, you will be saved. He's not saved yet, but his almsgivings, his charity, and he's a God-fearer, is still going up to God for a memorial sacrifice, literally a priesthood, Old Testament duty. And so before he's saved, he's doing good works, and and so what you're telling me with how you understand James 2 they don't make sense in given the light of Cornelius.
Yeah. So real quick, what I said earlier, how you don't see a transition described from James, where you go from not saved to saved. If you did, you would have a point.
So the people who, tell people to go away in peace, you're a fool, and the people that actually do it, there's not like a stark difference between those two faiths.
That's not what he's saying. That's exactly what James is saying, that those two are two different faiths. You never see the person who says it and doesn't do it make the transition to the person who's doing it. That's what this point is.
Yeah.
You don't see that in James. He is solely making a distinction between dead faith, false faith, professed only faith, and true living faith.
So to use biblical language, if you think about sheep and goats, there are two different categories of people, or wheat and tares. You don't ever see where they like vacillate between one group and the other, right? Jesus says at the end, the tares will be burned up, right? And the wheat will be gathered. That is his church. So they will exist alongside each other, and that's why James is valuable, because you're going to see people, in whatever church you go to, who profess faith, they get baptized, they love people around them, they seem to speak the Christian language, they use our terminology and things like that, but then eventually, something happens and they walk away, right? And we try to wrap our brains around that and go, why does this happen? Well, Scripture talks about it. James is a good example. 1 John is another good example, that they went out from us to demonstrate that they never were of us, and that's what makes...
Oh, so you're assuming people can't fall away from faith?
No, we affirm that they do fall away, but what the distinction we make is that they never actually had a real saving faith to begin with.
They had the professed faith that James talked about.
Not trying to change the subject, but specifically the presuppositions I'm talking about are things like this. Like when the author of Hebrews says that people crucify Christ afresh when they sin.
Yeah.
So it means that they crucified Christ before in their sins,
Yeah.
and then they did something again, they crucified him again.
Yeah.
So doesn't that constitute a truly repentant heart?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So you're Hebrews 10, I think, right? Or somewhere around there. Yeah, that's a passage that is challenging for a lot of people because it seems to suggest that real believers can fall away. I think when you look at it in context with the Hebrew Christians, they had immense pressure on them from the Jews at the time to repudiate Christ, to come back to Judaism, and to basically, follow in the footsteps of their ancestors, because that's their heritage, right? And so when you think about the unpardonable sin that Jesus talked about, this is kind of like the conventional answer to that passage is, we think that only the Jews who lived at the time of Jesus were capable of committing this sin, because they had the law and the prophets. So in other words, they had all the knowledge sufficient for them to arrive at an understanding that Jesus is the Messiah. But what they did is they rejected him. They crucified him, they killed him, and then they repudiated him, and then they persecuted his bride after the fact.
Yeah, if it was sufficient, why would Jesus Christ need to preach to them?
Well, good
Why
question.
would he need to send apostles?
Good question. You have to look at Isaiah, because it actually says in Isaiah
Okay.
I just didn't want to like take off
Okay,
without
no,
saying
you're
it.
good.
Yeah, I gotta leave soon too. But when you look at Isaiah, Jesus frequently quotes from it, where he says, "Hearing and they will not hear, seeing and they do not believe, and they do not understand."
Yeah, they need a preacher to preach to them.
Well, no. What I'm saying is this was God's judgment foretold on the covenant breakers, and that's why Stephen's speech in Acts is so powerful and so condemning, because they had all the prophets from Exodus, Moses basically, all the way through very last prophet John, and then boom, they killed them all. So all the blood of the prophets is on their hands, and that's why the covenant breaking was such a big deal.
Yeah, so they needed, they didn't need the text alone, they needed prophets.
Well, you remember what Jesus says in the parable with Lazarus, that even if if someone doesn't believe in the law and the prophets, then they won't even believe if someone comes back from the dead. So Jesus' indictment is, if you don't believe what you already have, then like even someone coming back from the dead won't be sufficient. So Jesus' standard is that the law and the prophets, they should be the ones that point you to me. Because like in Luke where it says,
but where does he say that they're sufficient?
Sorry?
Where does he say that the law and the prophets are sufficient?
I'm paraphrasing there, but in the parable of Lazarus, he says, if they don't believe the law and the prophets, then they will not believe it, even if someone comes back from the dead. So Jesus is making a pretty strong statement that what they have, so that's where I use the term sufficient.
You're talking about Luke 16 at the end of it.
Yeah, I think that's right. But yeah, the larger point is just that Jesus said that that's what they needed, and really that would have pointed to him, because when you look later on in Luke, after the resurrection, where he opens the disciples' minds to understand the scriptures and things like that, all of that's important and it's meaningful, but as I'm sure you'd agree, Jesus specifically pointed out, the scriptures testify of me, right?
Yes.
And we'd probably high five over that, and we would agree, no problems there. But yeah, that's like really what it boils down to.
Okay, so
I'm sorry if that's not like the most helpful, full answer.
No, it is. I know I was talking about how does Cornelius fit into your understanding of James, and then there was something right after that I wanted to get to.
Okay.
Will get saved.
Can't remember, so it must not be what we're supposed to talk about. What do you want something to ask me?
The last time we talked, did you look at those verses that I asked you to look at? In terms
I remember
of
Aaron giving me some, but I don't remember what you gave me.
Well, what I asked was, I just wanted like a statement of belief from you in terms of like what constitutes personal holiness, righteous conduct, in terms of like how it pertains to like the tongue and speech. Did you look at any of that?
Oh, that's right. You did ask me to do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't set apart a study time to study them.
Okay. Can I challenge you to do it again?
Yeah. I'll see you. Are you going to the store? All right. See ya. Are you going to get there in time?
I'm going to leave soon, so if you want to leave with him, it's probably a good time.
With Thomas.
Okay. Yeah, because my wife and kids.
Is that okay if I leave with you? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But I challenge you to look at that again, because I think we had a good discussion last time, all things considered. So.
All right. Yeah. What is
If you're saved.
If
you're saved.
What is your like? Not that you have one. I'm just assuming that you do. What is like your problem with Latter-day Saints not accepting like true monotheism? Because if one is to,
Sure.
If one is to assume, like, I would think most scholars do, that the Bible doesn't constitute true monotheism, why would it be then necessary for Latter-day Saints to accept that as well? Now there's a huge presupposition in that I just I pointed out.
So if I can give a simplistic theological answer, the answer would be is that God considers sin of all kinds a capital offense.
It's not to get saved.
So I would. I mean, not to get off topic, I would think that some sins are worse than others.
Well, so what I mean by that is every sin is worthy of death.
I would say spiritual death.
I would say physical death too. All of it. Whether it's lying, lust, stealing, idolatry, blasphemy, all of it.
Okay. I have a different understanding of Romans.
Well, do we agree or disagree on that point?
I disagree, but I'll let you continue.
Okay. So, to sort of sum up that point, is that Jesus had to die for every single one of those sins, and all of them were a capital offense. So to put it this way, there is not a single one that God does not hate.
Okay. Was it just without? I'm not trying to get off topic again.
Yeah.
Was it death alone, or was it something greater than death?
I don't know what you mean.
No, because you
So like,
if you were to snap her,
Rome crucified thousands of people. And all those, was the mere death of crucifixion and flogging, does that pay for someone's sins? Or is it something greater that Jesus Christ did that was greater than just mere death at the cross? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I think so. It sounds like you're inquiring about like the mechanics of the crucifixion and like how that equates to.
So basically, what I just heard you told me without trying to straw man is that specifically the death at the cross is alone is what paid for all of our deaths that we should receive for any sin that we commit.
Yeah, he was wounded for our transgressions.
Yeah. Okay. So if that is the case, then I feel that on that basis, that every person who Rome ever flogged and crucified wouldn't have a need for Jesus Christ.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So if we were to argue that every person who was crucified was potentially the Messiah,
I'm not saying that they were a Messiah. Just that they suffered those same things.
Right. But what I'm saying is, really, that's the only way you could, like, I guess, make the point, is you'd have to contend that there was more than one potential Messiah who was crucified. Because even though it was like a horrible way to die, and I really can't like oversell like just how terrible crucifixion is. The reason for it was God's wrath was poured out on the Son in our place.
Exactly.
Right? The penal substitutionary atonement.
Greater than,
Yeah.
I think the cross alone. I don't know if you agree with that.
Well, so I agree that there is a very real, what's a good term for this? Is that there is a very grim reality to God's holiness and His justice, and that it extends far beyond than what we see out like here in space, like this world. Like His justice is cosmic. So yes, there is something far above someone merely dying on a cross, like Jesus dying, the Son of God being slain. That was a momentous event, the worst act that mankind has ever committed, bar none. So yes, it was the worst thing that ever happened on this planet, and yet God used it for good. So I don't know if that like totally answers the question.
Yeah, kind of. So, like, if Jesus Christ suffered the actual wrath of God, then I mean, maybe we're agreeing, we just don't know. Because what I'm hearing, like, I don't know if you understand the Latter-day Saint perspective of the Gethsemane, right? The starting, the atonement starting in Gethsemane, finishing at the cross, rather than being at the cross alone.
Right.
So there's a spiritual aspect to it. It's not necessarily physical, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I was getting at with the we received death.
Yeah, like the agony or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So we received. I mean, that would be what the punishment would be, right? I'm not like. Right?
Sorry, I'm not sure what.
Like a spiritual
what
punishment.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Death from sin would be a spiritual punishment.
Oh, so are you talking about humans? Or?
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about just in respect to the atonement of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I mean, in the Protestant categories, what we're saying is there's a separation between man and God. Like, there's no relationship.
I can have the keys.
Yeah.
Oh, it matters.
And then being spiritually dead and all that entails. But then, yes, also the physical component, namely that we all die. So, yeah, there's two realities there for sure. Does that help at all?
Yeah, it does. I am gonna let you go.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks for talking to me again.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, I thought you were.
Good to meet you. Okay.
I'll give you a fist because my hand's sweaty.
Yeah, mine too. Thomas.
Remember the dude that was sitting next to you? At the meeting?
No.
No, you don't?
So no. So I've been there a couple times. They do like various talks and stuff. Like my pastors go there and teach sometimes, and Ed Romine from First Baptist Church, he goes down there and teaches sometimes. I think he just taught on Spurgeon. But yeah, there's like 4 people that I recognize. There's Sandra Tanner, Bill McKeever, I think Aaron was there, and one other person. The guy was
Mark Gomez?
Who?
Mark Gomez?
Who's that?
He's one of Sandra Tanner's really good friends. He usually goes to this stuff.
What does he look like? Is he the
Latino?
what?
Latino?
If I saw a picture, maybe.
All right.
But
Okay.
I think the last time I actually like saw Sandra Tanner before that was like 2017, like back when her shop was still open. So yeah, I never really went there a lot, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
But
All right. Well,
yeah,
let you go.
have a good night.